So a little bit about myself. Like I said, I am a senior solutions consultant here at Mitratech. I've been here for about 10 years now in the legal and governance risk and compliance space, and have been working with hundreds and thousands of clients in not just this topic, but essentially how to be able to make their legal department as a whole a little bit more efficient, since we're all being asked to do more with less. And this is one of the ways that we'll talk through today of how workflow itself can be able to impact some of that. So for today's agenda, we're going to cover really high level what workflow is and what we approach and how the industry typically thinks about as what for workflow, what type of legal work actually can get impacted by that workflow, and then how we've seen clients of ours work through leveraging workflow to reduce a lot of errors that happen, reduce manual entry of data, reduce duplication of data across different systems. So just be able to streamline how your individuals are working inside the organization. So what is workflow, and what are we talking about when we talk about our workflow product in general, TAP? So workflow is typically defined when we approach it in three different ways. So it's a process that's business user owned. So someone you can point to inside the organization that knows how they can work, what steps need to be taken, and what stakeholders are actually involved in that element of workflow. The other thing that becomes important when you're trying to automate workflow is understanding what the level of effort is when we need to make updates to that workflow, when our processes change and we have to leverage other individuals inside the organization or completely follow different separate paths. So one of the important things that you have to have there is you need to have something that's going to be easily adaptable, that's going to be able to be malleable and flexible enough so that you're not always having to reach out to IT to work with your product, or reach out to your service provider to have them create these changes for you. It needs to be something that you're owning internally and holistically, so that when these changes happen, you can adapt really quickly and really easily. The other thing here to keep in mind is that who's actually going to be the stakeholder for these different workflows or these different products, right? So is it only someone within legal? Is it legal and your internal clients that you're pulling in? Is it going to be people that you're interacting with outside the organization? So do we need to bring them in as essentially stakeholders? And how do those individuals all work with each other? And how can they access the information and access the stakeholders that they need to work with when we're actually talking about including technology as part of this? TAP is the one that we're going to be looking at today, and we'll be going through a specific use case around a legal service request portal. Now, as we move through what makes a workflow work well, these are the typical things we hear from clients around what is in your organization that when you hit the ground running, can be really low-hanging fruit to what to automate when you're thinking about automating processes. It's not going to be your really behemoth style, large volume, stakeholders all over the place, right? That's more of a phase 2 or phase 3 when you start thinking about implementing workflow overall. But when you're just getting kicked off in automating different processes, these things tend to be the most successful ones that we've seen with clients. So anything that's really heavily checklist driven, anything that you see passing emails back and forth for approvals, or we've all seen the responded email type thing, right? So how can we remove you from email completely to be able to work in more of a tool that allows you to be not only autonomous, but capturing audit histories so that you can make sure you're seeing who's making changes, when those changes are being made, what those changes are that are being made, and reduce that manual follow-up and leverage the technology in a way that is reaching out to the individual that needs to notify and reminding them that things need to happen, and continuing to push that workflow, inevitably leading to lower SLAs that we're always trying to meet within legal. The other thing that we see here is that legal's continuously being asked more and more to be that thought leader, right? You interact with all sorts of elements of the organization, and historically we've seen legal be a cost center for organizations. So by being able to automate a lot of these things, you can lean more into that thought leader element. So when you're working with engineering or marketing or manufacturing, right, or procurement, whoever it is, it gives you the opportunity to be the forefront and the driver in the seat of how we can make these processes much more efficient. Here's an example of one of our clients. You don't have to read all these right now, but here's an example of one of our clients that actually came in and started their workflow process with just one automation, and then completely changed how they worked and how the organization operated, and rolled it out not just within legal, but the actual entire organization. So NetApp here, many of you on this call should be familiar with Connie Breton. She's a huge advocate over in Clock and how automation happens and how legal operation functions. But they actually leveraged this tool here in the beginning as just a self-service NDA process. So how can we take all of that high volume, low complexity documents and put them in a end-to-end situation where legal really doesn't have to touch on it, and they can build in predictable variability. So they were able to come in, have the individual initiate the NDA, go out to the counterparty outside the organization, right through signature, and pull it off of legal's plate completely, freeing them up for more valuable work. And once that was rolled out and they saw how successful it was, they had the opportunity to be able to roll this out into many different elements of legal that just became autonomous. And then it rolled out into finance, HR, and marketing, just different processes where legal became that thought leader and was able to go to these different parts of the organizations and just ask them, hey, what are you doing today that you wish you could be doing better, and then help them work through that process. The other thing with workflow here is that it's important to bring the tool to where your users are already working. So what you'll see today with TAP as well is that it has a lot of out-of-the-box integrations with things like Microsoft Teams. So you can actually launch the portal or the workflow directly from Teams, or DocuSign and Adobe Sign are both out-of-the-box integrations for when you need e-signature on documents, as well as being able to launch this from other tools like Salesforce, where when you are working with sales organization, working with contracting and things like that, instead of having to go to a portal or try to find out where this exists, we can launch it directly from within inside of Salesforce with a click of a button. So giving your users the opportunity to be able to launch it directly from there is actually great. Now, let's move over to the actual tool itself so I can show you what we have as an example for today of how we can leverage these digital things when it comes to fruition and actually exposing that element of workflow automation. All right. So here is an example of what a portal could look like for any kind of organization. The great thing here is that this is completely flexible based off of the needs of your organization. So depending on the type of data you want to be able to capture, the type of information you want to expose to different users, the look and feel of how your organization operates, this gives you the opportunity to completely brand it and make it your own. The main thing to keep in mind here that we're trying to accomplish when we're thinking about workflow automation is when an individual gets to this page, gets to something like this, how can we make it so that they're not inputting too much information that's not going to be relevant to them? How can we streamline it as much as possible so that we're getting all the information we need from them when we're interacting with them without putting too much onus on them? Some of the other ways we do that is leveraging integrations such as single sign-on. So you can see it automatically knows who I am as an individual coming to this page. We can leverage integrations to other systems. So if we have lists of data or information that's already inside the organization somewhere, instead of having typing, we can leverage those lists of data. So anything we can do here to make it easier. As we come down, this legal service request portal is one of the most common use cases that we hear around automation. We can then start to guide the user down one path or another based off of how it is they want to actually interact with legal. The drop down here consists of some of the most common things that we hear when we are talking about automation that become those easy, low-hanging fruit type things. The self-service NDA, which we just mentioned, is an example of that, where we give the user the ability right here to quickly search if there is an existing NDA with a client that you might be working with. If not, we can then start to capture all of that high-level information about that NDA or that document. The other great thing here is that as the user types in that information, not only can we have that information embed directly within the document itself, so maintaining that consistent data as we continue to move through it, we can also leverage things like Google Places. So here it helps to standardize that data that's coming in as well. So instead of 3 or 4 different ways spelling Northeast when it gets dropped into the document, we're having Google put in Northwest or Northeast exactly how it searches it there. So now when you go to pull back reports, that standardization of data becomes much more important. And you hear over and over again, clean data in is clean data out. So if you're not capturing it on the front end, you're not going to get good reports on the back end. So by leveraging a tool like this, you can help standardize all that data up front so that you can pull back those reports to really get a good understanding of what's happening around your business. As we continue to move down this, some of the other common things we see is around just FAQs. So a lot of times legal individuals are answering the same question over and over again. And oftentimes what's happening with that is that you are not only answering those questions, but you lose track of when that question was answered or how it was answered. So what you can start to do with this type of FAQ built into here, there's a couple different things you can do. So one, we can expose the user to different areas of the organization as it becomes relevant. So if I'm looking for company policies, let's go ahead and route the individual to somewhere else where that company policy may reside that legal is actually not working with. Or if we want to come submit an anonymous complaint, that's not something legal deals with. Here's your HR resource that you can go to. Or if it is something that is relevant to an individual inside of the organization here, for example, GDPR, company regulations, right? We can start to build a knowledge database inside of legal here where we can come in, pull in that information, provide guidance notes and hover tips of what they're asking, making sure they're asking the question the right time, the first time around. And now because you're building up that knowledge database, because you can build reporting around that, you can come in as legal and try and really understand, are we answering the questions that our stakeholders or internal clients are asking us? How many times or how often are we answering that same question over and over again? And if not, how can we augment this portal so when they do come to it, they have that whole element of self-service as well behind it? So we're taking, again, more of that low volume work that our attorneys are doing, repeatedly answering this question and automating it in a fashion that makes me come in here and allows me to be able to just let the individual self-service it. The last thing I'll touch on here, the legal dispute element. So a lot of our clients that we speak with have some kind of matter management system, or they have something to be able to manage all of that information that's actually working that matter. So what this essentially becomes is a way to intake information from the wider organization that may or may not become a matter. Historically, we'll see these come in directly from email. We'll see it come in manually from different elements throughout the organization, but this gives you the opportunity to start to build an audit history around when those requests actually get generated and provide any kind of compliance back for it. So if you ever get audited and need to prove where this request came from, this gives you the opportunity to be able to come in here and point directly to it. Additionally, you're also able to centralize all of that data in one place. So instead of having to pull from multiple different systems or pull from different email chains and try to coalesce all that information in one place, this gives you the opportunity to pull all that data in at the same time in one place. And then as we pull it in, not only are we able to leverage integrations, but pull in data that makes sense right here. So we're not having to come in and try to find out where all this information exists and what actually is going on when we're creating these types of reports and these types of intake methods. With most clients here, so once the request has actually been submitted, when we're talking about the idea of workflow, typically you want to give some type of feedback to the individual that their request isn't going just into the void. And here, what we see a lot of our clients do is just provide a simple, hey, thank you for your request. Here's the information that we're working on. Here's the legal SLA that you can expect or how long you can expect it to take before it reaches out to you. And just so you're not having that consistent follow-up from those different individuals that are just bombarding those email inboxes. we'll also want to keep in mind anytime that you make that submission, we'll want to know who the next stakeholder is, how they're being engaged. And one of the most common ways we see that is through email. And with those emails, these can all be configured as well. But with these emails as well, it gives me the opportunity to be able to leverage including different data elements that might be relevant, building in buttons. So whether or not we want to push a workflow forward or send it back to the original requester, it gives me a lot of opportunity there to be able to pull that right within here. Now, the other thing when I was talking about, so getting data in is just one element of it, but pulling data out becomes just as important when you're thinking about workflow processes overall. And some of the things that we're going to notice there, is going to be, so we switch on over here. So some of the things that we're going to notice here is from the workflow process side. So you'll want to have a dashboard that is in twofold here. So one, we'll want a working dashboard. So what is, as the requests are coming in, what am I actually working on, or what is my team working on, so I can see and understand what that different workload looks like. So here's just an example of what that dashboard could potentially look like. But the great thing here is that it's all user configurable. So based off of how I want to be able to see it versus how someone else may want to see it, it's all drag and drop. As I come in, for example, move my status over here to my third column, it becomes easily viewable and also easily filterable. So show me all of my requests that have come in within the past 30 days so I can pull that back and see it. Show me all of my requests that are high priority that I really need to look at. Or show me all the requests that my team is working on that I really need to focus on. So these types of working dashboards become quintessential to be able to understanding what that workload actually looks like or how much information is flowing into the system. This is going to be more of your day-to-day working, your people that are in here every day, boots on the ground, trying to figure out what's actually going on. But that data in and that clean data out is also important on the holistic scale. So when we're looking at it on the high level across my entire organization, having some element of reporting to understand what's going on inside my organization also becomes important. So not only can these help you understand what your legal SLAs look like or how much of your team is focusing on different elements, but these types of dashboards can also give you the opportunity to be able to justify additional headcount. So we have this number of volume coming in every month. How can we justify additional headcount to actually get them to work with us? Or what are the types of requests that are typically coming in so that we can understand what that business load allocation looks like, or where my legal team is spending the most time to understand, can we shift resources or can we allow other people to do different things here so that they're making the most out of their time? Or even down to the stage by stage level to understand where in that workflow we may have actual hiccups or nuances. So are there certain elements or certain stakeholders that it continues to get stuck in and we're spending a lot of time in, and how can we reduce that time and work on it to make sure that they're not getting stuck on that? So whether it's bringing in additional resources, whether it's reallocating those resources, so how can we make it so that we're reducing all this as much as possible? Now, when we are actually working through different workflows, creating these workflows, pivoting to business processes, it becomes important to be able to do that really quickly and really easily. So the great thing about a tool like this is it's all drag and drop. When we're talking about coming in here and designing the actual workflow, creating these workflows, so instead of having to rely on your IT resources or having to rely on individuals that are actually part of the organization where you're getting the tool from, it's important that legal actually owns this. And going back to Connie Bretton's story, they're the ones who are actually able to make these changes. So anyone that has an acumen of a business analyst type feel or background is very easily able to do something like this. So what you're seeing right now is just the back-end designer of how I actually created this workflow. So as a quick layout, on the left-hand side, we have all the different fields of information that we want to be able to capture as what we're pivoting, when we're making those changes, when we're understanding those business processes that change. On the down the middle is going to be all the different elements of the portal that we saw when we kicked off here. And then on the right-hand side are going to be different properties. So this is going to be things like, do we want to make it required? Do we want to be able to build in validations? So the more of this that we can add on the back end, the better the experience for your business user on the front end. And we want to front load as much of this as possible so that we're not getting requests into legal that are going to be incomplete. So we're able to do things like build in mandatory fields so that we know that every element of what we're getting in is going to be what we need as part of that request. So those types of things can all be built in here, making sure that we're getting the right information from the right people at the right time. Now, when we're talking about adjusting to future business processes and changing how the landscape changes every time, we want to be able to make changes to this really quickly and easily. So for example, let's say we want to now capture the state of where this request has been launched from. All we have to do is drag and drop that information over, go ahead and include it right within here. And all of a sudden we have the opportunity now to not only manually type in that information, but also leverage integration. So it becomes important to be able to use these so that instead of having manual entry of data or having to reduplicate all that data, we now have that entire list accessible right to us. The other element of this that becomes important is when we're talking about actually pivoting this information and making sure that the right information is being exposed to the right people. This gives us almost a Microsoft Visio look and feel here, where we're able to go ahead and pull in how this particular request is routing. So as we change paths, as we include new stakeholders, as we decide who's actually responsible here, all it is, again, is drag and drop, move it to where it goes, and we've created a new path for where that request needs to go. So for example, if we want to say any new request that's part of California needs to now go during this path, we've created that path for California here, and it's that easy. But it becomes important to be able to create and make these changes and include these changes really quickly and easily, because you have the legal department making so many changes across so many facets of the organization and really quickly. So we want to be able to adapt to those changes really quickly and not have to worry about reaching out to another stakeholder and different individuals in the organization to make these changes for you. Typically what we've seen and what we've heard from a lot of clients in the past is, you know, something changes within legal and then you have to reach out to IT via ticket, and then you have to wait 6 weeks. And by the time you even get a response back from them, your process has changed once again. So being able to change and adapt really quickly becomes important when you're thinking about workflow automation overall. Okay. Well, that was the last thing I wanted to cover over here, and then how workflow automation needs to be able to work. But is there any questions so far on the audience side here? All right, I got one here. So who is the typical person that builds workflows? So typically what we've seen for individuals and organizations that are building these workflows, it tends to fall inside of legal ops. So for those organizations that have legal ops as part of the organization, that those individuals tend to be the ones that own creating and maintaining these workflows. Typically, they'll start with just one workflow or one process that they want to automate, and then they'll go ahead and start to expand as they uncover and identify additional ones. So legal ops essentially is really focusing on reducing that time it takes to get things done, making sure that legal overall is efficient as a function of the organization. So they're typically the ones that are maintaining and controlling all of that. Typically, anyone that has some understanding of how the workflow flows, so who are the stakeholders, who are the people that are part of it, those are the ones that are typically the ones that are creating these different workflows and including them as part of the wider organization. So for this particular product, I got another question. So how does this product integrate with other products? So typically for our product here, we see it serve as a really good glue between other systems. So if you have let's say you have disparate functions or disparate products inside the organization. This serves as a way to connect that data between the systems. One of the most common ones we see is around matter management and some kind of intake. So how do we get information in from wider organizations? We see it as a really common way to be able to pull in data from Salesforce or like a document management system like iManage or NetDocs. The great thing about this is that you can actually build the integration inside of the system itself. So you don't have to, as long as you have the acumen internally, you have to come to us as a vendor to make this change for you or on your behalf, but you can actually do it right within here. So any tool that has an open API layer, this can actually plug into and pull data from or push data into. Okay, and then another question here. So what's the most common use cases that we see as automation for legal departments? So the legal service request is probably the most common one that we see, but that can be a facet of many different things here. But additionally, on top of that, we do see ways to engage your outside counsel firms as a really common way. So instead of having to lean on emails, we'll use a tool like this to be able to interact with them to get matter status updates or to be able to get documents directly from your outside counsel firms. It's just a better way to be able to collaborate with those different firms without having to lean on your email overall. I think one of the more, the NDA, so anything that's also high volume, low complexity documents, so CDAs, NDAs, those types of things, those tend to be really good use cases as well. So this serves really good as like a light CLM. So for any of those low touch type documents, this becomes really good in building them and including some conditional logic to ensure we're only pulling in the right clauses or pulling the right information. That predictable variability that I talked about, those types of things are really good to be able to automate. So we have a list of out-of-the-box integrations on the website. We have a list of out-of-the-box integrations for what it can do, but additionally, there's no limitation on what integrations can happen. So we did have a question around where you can find other systems it can integrate with. So within our Mitratech website, you can see the out-of-box integrations, and there's no integration we've come across yet that we haven't been able to do, just through our different partners and then also through our own internal resources as well.